They laughed when I walked into the party wearing the same shoes from last year. They whispered behind my back when I ordered the cheapest drink on the menu. And when I told them I was working on a business idea, they straight up mocked me. Said I'd never make it, said I'd always be that broke guy from the neighborhood with nothing but big dreams and empty pockets. Well, they were half right. I did have big dreams. But what they didn't see coming was how far those dreams would take me. Because 5 years later, I walked into their office, not as a guest, not as a joke, but as their new boss. I had just bought the very company they once used to laugh from. Want to know how I turned humiliation into a $10 million 0 cents win? Stay with me, because this is the story of how I got the last laugh and the last signature. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated. Let's begin. My name's Victor. I'm 29 now, but this story starts when I was 22, fresh out of college, broke, and full of ideas nobody took seriously. Back then, I lived in a tiny studio apartment above a noisy laundromat. My mattress was on the floor, the fridge was always close to empty, and my laptop was the only thing I owned that held any real value. I didn't have much, but I had a vision. I wanted to build something of my own, a tech platform that would help small businesses automate their customer service with AI. I was obsessed with it, but obsession doesn't pay rent. So I worked nights as a barback just to keep the lights on, while every spare second went into coding, learning, researching, and pitching my idea to anyone who would listen. One of those people was Daniel. He had been my friend since high school, or so I thought. He came from money, always had the latest phone, the best clothes, the kind of confidence that only people who've never had to worry about bills seem to carry. I shared everything with him, every design draft, every pitch deck, every late night idea. He told me it was interesting, but also said things like, "I don't think you're the guy who can pull this off." And I thought he was being honest with me, brutally honest maybe, but still a friend. Until one night, at a party full of people we both knew, he made a joke in front of everyone. I had just mentioned I was looking for investors, and he cut in with a laugh. "Investors? Bro, you can't even invest in a haircut." Everyone laughed, including the girl I liked, including people I admired. I smiled like it didn't hurt, but it did. Deep. I left early that night, walked home in the cold, and couldn't sleep. Not because of the joke, but because I realized I was surrounded by people who didn't believe in me. Not even my so-called best friend. But instead of quitting, I went silent. I stopped pitching, stopped sharing, stopped talking. I built. I poured everything into my startup idea, refining the tech, testing it on small businesses I met during my night shifts, and slowly, quietly, it started working. I was making tiny amounts of money, barely enough to notice, but it was proof I had something real. They didn't know it yet, but the broke guy they mocked was about to make them regret every word. And I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed time. After that party, I didn't speak to Daniel for weeks. I didn't respond to texts, didn't show up to mutual hangouts. I wasn't angry. I was focused. The humiliation had flipped something inside me. I stopped caring about validation. I stopped looking for support. Instead, I created a daily schedule so strict it bordered on obsession. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., spend the morning coding and improving the back end of my AI system, then work my bar shift from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. When I got home, I'd eat cheap ramen, drink black coffee, and keep working until I passed out on my mattress. I started reaching out to local businesses, dry cleaners, dental clinics, mom and pop stores, anyone who might need an affordable customer support chatbot. Most said no, but a few said yes. I charged next to nothing, just enough to get data, testimonials, and case studies. And that data? It proved everything I had said from the beginning. My system worked. It saved businesses money. It kept customers happy. It was scalable. Around this time, I applied for a local startup accelerator. I didn't have a fancy degree or shiny investors behind me, but I had results. And one of the panelists, a former startup founder turned angel investor, saw something in me. He gave me my first $50,000, 0 cents. I used it to build a cleaner UI, hire a freelance developer, and register the company under the name I'd dreamed of for years. Novolink AI. That was the moment things shifted. Suddenly, doors that were once slammed shut began creaking open. I got invited to speak at a small tech event. A blog wrote about my bootstrapped rise. People who once laughed now watched silently as I climbed. Daniel, he didn't know any of this. I hadn't blocked him, but I'd gone ghost. He was still partying, still posting filtered photos of overpriced cocktails, still laughing in rooms I no longer entered. And that was fine with me, because I wasn't done building, not yet, not even close. Every late night, every ignored email, every moment someone looked down on me for being broke was now fuel. I was building something they couldn't see coming. Not because they were blind, but because they never believed I'd rise without them. And that's exactly what I intended to do. A year had passed since Daniel mocked me at that rooftop party. In that time, I had transformed from the guy who couldn't even afford decent shoes into the CEO of a fast-growing tech startup. Novolink AI was landing serious deals, one with a hotel chain that needed automated guest services, another with an e-commerce platform, and a third with a healthcare firm overwhelmed by customer support. I wasn't just surviving, I was building something that could change the game. Then, one afternoon, in the middle of a product demo call, I got a LinkedIn notification. It was a message request from Daniel, the guy who laughed in my face when I said I had big dreams. The subject line said, "Let's catch up." I opened the message. It was short, polite, even. He said he'd heard about Novolink and was really impressed with the progress. He wanted to chat. He didn't mention the rooftop party. He didn't mention the humiliation, but I could read between the lines. Out of curiosity, I looked up his company, Voxen, the one he started after graduating. It wasn't doing well. Growth had flatlined. Their last funding round fell through. Key team members had quietly removed the company from their bios. Daniel's once booming ego was now whispering through the cracks. I agreed to a meeting. We met at a sleek cafe downtown. He was wearing the same smug designer jacket, but this time he looked tired, a little desperate. He ordered a double espresso. I got a green tea. He opened with compliments, said I'd built something really special. Then came the pitch. He wanted to discuss a potential partnership. I stayed silent. He fumbled forward. Maybe even a merger or an acquisition, if that's something you'd consider. I looked him straight in the eyes. The guy who once said I'd be lucky to land a job, now asking me to buy his broken company. And for a brief second, I almost felt bad. Almost. I told him I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. I wasn't just going to buy Voxen. I was going to make it a footnote in my story, the one that started with humiliation and ended with a $10 million lesson in silence, patience, and revenge. After our awkward cafe meeting, I took Daniel's proposal back to my team, not because I was seriously considering it, but because I wanted to explore every angle. If we were going to do this, if I was going to buy the company that once laughed me out of a party, it had to serve our mission, not my ego. My CFO Priya ran the numbers. Voxen was bleeding cash, their client retention was terrible, and their AI model hadn't been updated in over a year. What they did have, however, was a decent back-end infrastructure and some residual brand recognition. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing we couldn't build ourselves, but I saw a different kind of value. Voxen had once been the it startup in our city, the one everyone pointed to at demo nights and pitch competitions. They had good PR, a strong domain name, and a user base that still remembered the brand fondly. If we acquired them, we could absorb their tech, rebrand it under Novolink, and completely erase their legacy while using it to boost ours. I gave Danielle a call. "I'll take it," I said, "but on my terms. Full acquisition, no shared leadership, no merged teams, you walk away clean, and I take it all." He paused for a long time. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride. Then he said, "Okay." The deal closed in 3 weeks. The day the documents were signed, I walked into the Voxen office, the same space where I once applied for a job and never even got a call back. I stood at the front of the bullpen and introduced myself. Starting today, Novalink owns this company, I said, and we're doing things differently now. I didn't gloat, I didn't point fingers, but when I passed Daniel's old corner office and saw it empty, it felt like poetic justice. A week later, I called Daniel again, not out of obligation, but closure. I hope you land on your feet, I said, but just know I never forgot how you treated me. This isn't revenge, this is the reward for not becoming like you. He didn't respond, and he didn't need to, because I had already said everything I needed with action. I spent weeks preparing the acquisition offer, not because I needed their failing company, but because I needed the full circle moment. I wanted to walk into that boardroom with facts, figures, and funding that screamed, I made it! Without you, my lawyer and team ensured every clause was airtight. I wasn't just buying Voxen, I was gutting the old culture and rebuilding it from the ground up. I was buying their name, their platform, their staff, and ultimately, their silence. When the meeting day came, I arrived early. I wore the same watch Daniel once laughed at during a pitch night years ago. I'd kept it as a reminder. Their offices were dimmer than I remembered. The receptionist looked tired. It was the aura of a company bleeding from every corner. Daniel walked in with two other partners. The smugness I remembered was gone. His eyes were sunken, voice flat. Life had humbled him. He shook my hand like we were old friends. Victor, long time, thanks for considering this. I gave a small nod. Let's get to it. We sat, my proposal was clear. Full buyout, generous severance for staff, rebranding, no space for Daniel or his partners in the new leadership. It wasn't cruel. It was clean, strategic, smart. Daniel tried to negotiate. Maybe we could stay on in advisory roles. There's a lot of legacy knowledge we could offer. I looked him dead in the eye. Your legacy is the reason Voxen is where it is. I'm not here to preserve it. I'm here to replace it. The room went silent. His partners exchanged awkward glances. One of them, Neil, leaned forward. Honestly, it's a relief. We knew it was over. At least this way, it lives on, even if it's under your name. I signed the deal that afternoon. The company was mine. I didn't celebrate that night. I went home, sat on the balcony, and just breathed. For years, I'd been fueled by this quiet rage, the memory of being laughed at, dismissed, underestimated. And now, it was over. I had nothing left to prove. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger, because what I'd built wasn't just a company, it was a message. And the people who once mocked me, they now answered to me. Word of the buyout spread fast. Within days, tech blogs were buzzing about the nobody who turned the tables on his former classmates. Journalists tried to twist it into a classic revenge story, but I didn't engage. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity on my terms. Still, Voxen's remaining staff were skeptical. They had survived months of layoffs, dwindling morale, and clueless leadership. I didn't expect them to trust me immediately, so I called a company-wide meeting. I stood on the same stage where Daniel used to brag about projections that never materialized. But I didn't wear a suit. I didn't speak in jargon. I spoke like a builder, a survivor, someone who had eaten rejection for breakfast and used it as fuel. I'm not here to repeat the past, I began. I'm here because I know what it's like to be dismissed. I've been the broke kid with ideas. I've been the outsider looking in. But that outsider just bought the company. And now we do things differently. I talked about vision, not just profits. Culture, not just code. I shared my belief that a company isn't built on founders, it's built on the people who stay late, fix bugs, deal with angry users, and never get credit. Faces started to change. Walls began to come down. After the meeting, a senior developer approached me. Victor, he said, this place hasn't felt alive in years. You brought something back today. And I think we all needed it. It hit me then. I wasn't just fixing a broken business. I was healing something deeper for them and for myself. That night, I got a text from Daniel. Congrats, you won. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. because it was never about winning. It was about becoming. A few months after the buyout, I was invited to a tech innovation gala, the kind of event I used to watch from the sidelines, wondering what it would feel like to belong there. Now, I wasn't just attending, I was one of the honorees. Boxin, under new leadership, had released a beta version of our reworked app. The design was clean, the tech was stable, and most importantly, it was actually solving problems for real people. The buzz was building again, but this time, it was earned. At the gala, people kept approaching me, investors, founders, even a few journalists who had ignored me back in the college days. They shook my hand and congratulated me like they'd always believed in me. I smiled politely, but part of me never forgot who truly showed up when I had nothing. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, they announced the Founders Redemption Award, a special category recognizing underdogs who had turned failure into legacy. My name was called, applause roared. I walked up to the stage, heart pounding, not out of nerves, but out of disbelief. As I accepted the award, I took a breath and spoke from the heart. There are people in this room who laughed at me when I pitched my first idea, who said I didn't have the look of a CEO, the background of a founder, or the money to even try. And that's fine. I don't blame them. But what I learned is that greatness doesn't come from who notices you. It comes from who refuses to stay unnoticed. There was a hush. Then another wave of applause. Not just polite, real. Back at my table, I checked my phone. Another message from Daniel. This one was longer. I watched your speech. I won't lie. It stings, but maybe I needed to lose everything to see how wrong I was. You built something real. I didn't. I hope one day I can say the same. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know if it was regret, manipulation, or something in between, but I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt free. Because Daniel didn't define my story. I did. After the gala, life shifted into a new rhythm. I was traveling more, speaking at conferences, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and finally waking up without that knot of anxiety in my chest. But one afternoon, as I walked past a coffee shop near campus, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Eli. He was one of the loudest guys in that college group, the same one who laughed when I showed up wearing secondhand shoes, who called me charity case behind my back. But this time, Eli didn't look smug. He looked tired, worn down in a way that life sometimes humbles you, when you think you're on top forever. He saw me and froze. I could tell he debated walking away, but instead he nodded and said, "Victor, congrats on everything. Seriously." I smiled and nodded back. "Thanks, man. Hope you're doing all right." He paused. "You know, we were wrong about you, all of us. Daniel, me. We thought you'd fade out, but you didn't. You built something. You proved us all wrong." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. That moment was the victory, not just the words, but the look in his eyes. It wasn't envy, it was realization. And that was enough. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail from my old college department. They wanted to name a student innovation fund after me, the Victor Adams Resilience Grant. I was speechless. The same halls where I once walked feeling invisible now wanted to inspire others in my name. I stood in that building a week later giving a speech to students who were where I once had been, broke, overlooked, burning with ideas, and I told them what I wished someone had told me back then. It's okay if they laugh. Let them. It's okay if they count you out. Keep counting yourself in, because the truth is, they can't stop what they don't understand. And most of the time, they don't understand people who refuse to quit. As I left the hall, the plaque with my name already installed near the entrance, I thought about all the rooms I'd once felt too small for, and how every rejection had only prepared me to build my own doors. and now I was holding the keys. It all came to a head the day I walked into the boardroom of the very company that once laughed at me, the one Daniel and his circle mocked me from, thinking I'd never amount to anything. Only this time, I wasn't there to interview. I wasn't there to beg for approval or fit in. I was there as the man who now held the majority stake, the man who owned it. Daniel sat at the end of the table, flanked by a few remaining investors, who had stuck around through the company's steady decline. His face dropped when he saw me. The same eyes that once looked down on me in the lecture hall now darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who might stop what was coming. But there was no one left. I sat down calmly, placed the acquisition papers on the table, and said the words I had once only dreamed of. This is no longer your company, Daniel, it's mine now. There was no yelling, no dramatic outbursts, just silence. Heavy, humbling silence. He signed, and just like that, the cycle was complete. I didn't fire Daniel on the spot. I let him stay on for one final month, not out of mercy, but so he could walk those halls every day knowing he had built something on ego and lost it to someone he once called a joke. That was the real lesson. Outside, I stood in the morning light, looking up at the building that once shut its doors on me. The logo would change soon. New culture, new vision, new mission. But to me, it wasn't just business. It was proof. Proof that being underestimated was never a curse. It was a setup for a comeback. To the people watching this, maybe you've been mocked. Maybe they've doubted your dreams, belittled your grind, or treated your ambition like a joke. Let them. Just remember, quiet revenge is best served with success. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more true stories of transformation. Hit the like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder that the tables always turn, and drop a comment below. Tell us how you're working on your own comeback, because sometimes the ones who are laughed at become the ones who write the final chapter. Thank you for listening, and remember, never hand your future to someone who can't see your worth.